get these things right the first time, mate.
Yep, that's the idea.
High level of competence. Let's see how it goes. We're rocking and rolling. I'll start letting these boys in for you, mate.
Cool. Thanks, mate.
I'll share this link. Gentlemen, good evening.
Okay, Ben, how you going?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. You just give me a moment and we'll get cracking and I'll introduce our speaker as well.
This is the time of the talk where you usually hear the "get to bed." I told you to get to bed.
It's definitely, most definitely. But boys, welcome to a special session. Tonight, we're obviously going to dive into a session for the pod members only, which is called Resilience and Overcoming Adversity. Our presenter today is Mr. David Lee from Leeway Mind and Body Mastery. So Dave's going to run you through this particular topic. And what's going to happen, we're going to give Dave the space to do what he does best. And then towards the end, there's going to be opportunities where we can connect and ask various questions and he'll put it out there to you boys. But don't feel shy. I'll be here the whole time. So there's a chat function, which I believe is still active. Yes, there is a chat function going on. Feel free, boys, to drop things in there if things are resonating to you. Jump in there and then we can communicate via that way as well. But let's give Dave the space. And Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you, sir, and do what you do best, my friend.
Thank you, Ben, and good evening. I'm very, very privileged to be here and to be talking to you guys. I understand we're talking on a global scale these days. There are fellas from all over the world who've joined the High Performance Fathers. My name is David Lee. I'm a mind and body coach, which essentially means, as it may suggest, I work with the mind and the body. I believe you need a healthy mind in order to have a healthy body, in the respect that you need a healthy mind to decide to actually move that body to the degree that it will be healthy for you in the long term. And obviously from a nutrition perspective, that you feed that body, which keeps the body healthy, and also feed the brain, which ensures the brain is able to have a very healthy, happy, and positive mind. Now, tonight I'm talking about resilience and overcoming adversity. I like to remember the things that I've read. There's really nothing new under the sun. A lot of the things that people like myself talk about are my interpretations of the things that I've read and the people that I've met along the way, and any wise sayings that I might have heard are things that have resonated with me and might apply to you guys at the stage of life that you're at. There's a good Socrates quote for mine, which says, "Remember, there is nothing stable in human affairs. Therefore, do not take undue elation in times of joy, nor undue adversity in times, or undue depression in times of adversity." Essentially, that means that you take the good with the bad. There is a biblical quote in Corinthians which says, "Strength for today, and this too shall pass." Now, everyone's heard of "this too shall pass," but when it is actually expressed in the context of its biblical writing, if you like, it does start with "strength for the day, and this too shall pass." So what they're literally saying there is that you might be strong today, but tomorrow you may not have that strength. It's one of those things. I wear a kinetic watch. I wear it there are a lot of symbols in my life and a lot of things that I do that have to remind me of why I'm doing what I'm doing. The idea of a kinetic watch is if I wear it all the time, I don't ever need to wind it up rather. If I don't wear it, then I pick it up and it will have stopped. And it's a bit like us. You use it or you lose it. Benjamin Franklin said, "We don't stop playing because we get old. We get old because we stop playing." Now, I say to my clients from a physical perspective, we don't get old because we stop exercising. We don't stop exercising because we get old. We get old because we stop exercising. And that's movement for mind. So when you look at how you move the body, you've got to do it from a daily perspective. I've had people say, "Oh, how many rest days do you think I should have a week?" And I say, "Well, how many do you feel you need?" Well, my old PT used to say, "I have 2." And I say, two where you what? Where you don't do high intensity interval training. And they say, no, two where you do absolutely nothing. Now for mine, why? I mean, use it or lose it. Life rewards action. The idea that you may not be doing high intensity interval training, and for you blokes who don't know what that is, it's something that's keeping your heart rate at 80% of its maximum. Now, your maximum heart rate is 220 minus your age. So if you're a 40-year-old man, that means your maximum heart rate is 180 beats per minute. And high intensity interval training would mean that you would stay in that that heartbeat range for about 10 minutes out of a 45-minute workout. Anything more, you're in the danger zone. Anything less for an extended period of time, and that's known as medium intensity interval training, or lower than that as far as walking is concerned, is low intensity steady state cardio, or LISS. So I say no rest days, no rest for the wicked, as they say. But on the days that you're not training from a weights perspective, go for a walk, do something low impact, swimming, bike riding, something that's not jolting the body or putting too much stress on the body. Now, adversity could be seen as stress. Stress, in my definition, stress is determined by the degree to which you feel in control or out of control of your life. Now, from an exercise perspective, eustress is the good stress that we put our bodies under when we exercise. So getting that heart rate up, getting blood through the body, getting the muscles moving, the fluids going, that's good stress. It's known as eustress, EU stress. The bad stress, as I say, is stress that kind of keeps us under a level of anxiety or a level of depression. Lao Tzu said, anxiety is living in the future, depression is living in the past, and peace is living in the now. Now, my personal belief, I'm a big believer in living in the now. We've all heard of carpe diem. Carpe diem is seize the day. But have you heard of carpe punctum? And carpe punctum is seizing the moment. And life is basically made up of moment after moment after moment. And the more moments that you have, and the more you get on top of each of those moments, that's where momentum comes from. Now, my thing not against carpe diem, but it's you got all day to seize the day, whereas you've only got this moment to seize the moment. And moments that once you get a lot of moments in place, that's momentum. There's no such word as the datum, as in your days do go into days, and weeks do go into weeks, months go into months, years go into years, decades go into decades, but they're all a collection of moments. And in the idea of living in the now, all you have is this moment. The now is measured as 3 seconds. Now, the human body can go 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without oxygen. And if the now is measured as 3 seconds, then from when I started this particular piece to now, a lot of nows have changed. Now, I'm pretty lucky in the respect that my father was Irish. And as a young man, he used to use a lot of big words. And I developed a good vocabulary, finally working out what he meant a lot of the times. But when I was younger, he used to say to me, will you use your nous? Will you use your nous? Now, nous is intelligence. But in my young mind's eye, I understood him to be saying, use your nows, which pretty much meant I had to do whatever it was that he was asking me to do right now. And when I did do that and I responded immediately, he seemed to be happy and that Irish temper would go away. I did develop at a very young age the ability to live and be present in the now. Now, what this has to do with resilience and adversity is how you're feeling right now, if it's in a down sort of perspective or a bloody hell kind of how did I get here way of living. All you have is this moment, and every moment that passes is another opportunity to turn it all around. By actually being a part of this group and joining High Performance Fathers, you've actually given yourself a massive head start because you're doing something about it. Now, I have a lot of mnemonics in my training programs and my courses and my coaching programs. I have a lot of mnemonics. Now, a mnemonic, for those who haven't heard of it, it's a bit like an acronym. They are words that you use that enable you to remember a series of actions that you take that are beneficial and profitable to you in the end. Now, my first big overarching mnemonic is purpose. And a lot of people at this stage of their lives, they're looking for their purpose. You know, the age-old question, what is the meaning of life? What is my purpose? Now, in order for you to understand what your purpose is, first and foremost, you've got to have a plan. Now, that plan has to be around the different masts of mastery, as I call them. And now my daughter's a psychologist and she's doing her master's at the moment. Excuse me, master's, somebody who's considered to have mastered an art has to have done 10,000 hours in a certain field. Now, there is a theory that if you've actually done something 10,000 hours, then you get in the zone and things just happen for you. I've been coaching for over 25 years. So for me, this sort of thing, to stand up and riff to blokes like yourselves around resilience and adversity may seem easy. It's something that I love to do, but I also think at the back of my mind is, how can I help you guys overcome any adversity that you're experiencing or you may have experienced? And how can I impart upon you some of the ideas and things that I've learned over the years for how to be resilient? Now, from a purpose perspective, when I say you need a plan in the areas of mental, physical, spiritual, social, financial, family, business, and romance. Now, in each of those areas, your first place to start is to go, okay, out of 10, where 7's not an option, ask yourself, how do you rank yourself? Out of 10, where 7's not an option from a mental perspective. So, okay, what did I give myself? Right now, what do I give myself? An 8? Okay, cool. Physical, what do I give myself? An 8? Okay. Spiritual, well, you know, I haven't really done anything spiritual, or what is spirituality? So I'll give myself a 5. All right, put it down as a 5. Financial, well, I've done all my dough. I've gambled it up at the casino, so I'll give myself a 2. Or I've invested wisely. I put away 10% of everything I earn each week. So I'm pretty happy with where I am in life. I'll give myself an 8. Pretty good. Social, how do I feel? Now, you blokes have all joined High Performance Fathers. It has a very good cohort. There is a lot of a tribe mentality. Now, from that perspective, you actually work together and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. If you have a buddy system going, then there's a way that you're all speaking to each other and able to share. And I would encourage you, if you're not doing this already, and you know that somebody in your tribe, if you like, or your pod is local, catch up with them, share your problems. They say a problem shared is a problem halved. So if there's somebody you can be talking with about things to, that's pretty good. So from a social perspective, I would imagine you'd be pretty good in this respect. If not, put down the score. So mental, physical, spiritual, social, financial, family. How are you feeling with your family at the moment? Now, I have always had as my highest priority my family. So I could always give myself a 10 out of 10. Now, the reason I give myself a 10 out of 10, everything I did came back to my family. Now, if I ask people what they value, the 3 things they value most in life, a lot of them will say family, health, and money, not in any particular order. Now, I ask people if they're really not quite sure, where do you spend most of your time and where do you spend most of your money? Now, many, many years ago, I spent most of my time, you know, training, working out, walking, running, trailing, whatever it was, physical things, and most of my money on the apparel that went through that, kayaks, mountain bikes, whatever it was. So that was one of my high values. So it made sense for me to get out of the corporate world and to get into coaching and training, and obviously mind and body coaching, which I do these days. But the number one thing was family values. And I had as a priority, family first. And whenever anyone asked me, would I do something, my thought that would run through my mind would, what impact or effect will that have on my family? If it was positive, I would do it. If it was negative, I wouldn't do it. There are jobs that I've knocked back over the years that were offering ridiculous money for the sheer fact that they would have collectively, I was offered an international business director's role once, but I worked out it would have been collectively 2 months that I would have spent away from my family every year. So I knocked that job back. Now, that would have involved a lot of travel. I asked people to ask themselves, how many hours of overtime do you do a day? Now, here's an interesting thing that a lot of people don't understand. They own their own businesses and they work really, really hard in there, and they might work 10-hour days. Now, in my mind's eye, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for sleep, and 8 hours to do with as you please. If you're working longer than 8 hours, It means you're not working all the time you're working. People might argue, but if you worked all the time you work, you should be able to get done what you need to be doing during an 8-hour slot. They don't have to be 8 hours back to back either. If you're on your own business, there are the platinum hours and there are the golden hours. The golden hours are where the money can be made, where you're prospecting, where you're doing new business. New business is the lifeblood of any organization. Client retention. Client retention stops you being a blood donor to your competitors. A lot of people focus on new business. They get the new business in, then they palm it off to a junior or somebody who didn't have the same relationship, because it's not selling anymore, it's relationship marketing. They didn't have the same relationship that you did that got you the client that you got. You palm it off to a junior, and then your competitor comes in, takes your client off you, gives him the service and support, and builds that relationship. You now have to find a new client. So think about what you're doing there from a business perspective. But my point around overtime is just 2 hours overtime a day, 10 hours overtime a week over the course of a year is 12 weeks. One, unpaid if you're not the boss, or even if you're not paying yourself. 12 weeks unpaid, but 12 weeks that are collectively spent away from your family. So you be the judge. How are you doing that? Now, I say mental, physical, spiritual, social, financial, family, business. So how would you give yourself out of 10 where 7 is not an option in your business? Now, what I just mentioned there is the platinum hours and the business hours. The platinum hours are where you do the bookkeeping, the back of house stuff, the admin stuff. I've got two, my daughters are 24 and 23. I talked to them. I walked with one of them today and another one 2 days ago. And I talked with them around their life and their lifestyles and what's going on. My youngest daughter had been pushing for a promotion. She works in the media industry and she was in an admin role, but she's a born salesperson. She has phenomenal emotional intelligence and she has phenomenal relationship skills. And she's just a lovely person to boot, quite funny, very intelligent. Love her, of course, she's my daughter. And we workshopped through what she would need to do to get a role into sales, because as a communicator, she would be perfect for that company in sales. She got the job. She got the promotion. Everything's great. 2 days I spoke with her and I said, so have you called on all your new clients? She was given a client list. Oh, not yet. I said, what do you mean? Well, Mama, hang on. You wanted this. Everything we workshopped through was for you to get what you said you really wanted. Now you got it. Oh, but I've got to do admin. No one ever lost their job because their admin was down if their sales were up. And as a salesperson, which is what she is now, which is what she wanted, she's procrastinating. She's basically, they say procrastination is basically the thief of joy. So anytime you are literally, comparison's the thief of joy. Theodore Roosevelt said that. But procrastination is the thief of time. While you're not doing what you should be doing, you're pretty much stealing time from yourself. It is time, as Bruce Lee says, is what life is made up of. If you love life, you will love time, because time is what life is made up of. Time for me these days is my greatest commodity. I don't waste a minute. Everything I'm doing, I'm trying to do from a multitasking perspective, but I'm always making sure that I'm present in that moment. Now, the final 8 of my 8 masters of mastery is romance. Now, I would imagine if you're fathers, that there is a romantic interest in your life, whether that's going well or not going well. That's what you need to work upon. And it might be what some of you guys need to be resilient about. And it might be the adversity that you are facing. The most simple thing I say to any man is, or any woman for that matter as well, because I work with women, is if you treat the relationship at the end like you did at the beginning, there would be no end. So my question is, out of 10, where 7 is not an option, what would you give yourself on your romance stage? Now, it might be that you're looking for romance. Very good. How's it going for you? Now, it all starts with self. Self-love is first love. It's very hard for you to love somebody else if you're incapable of loving yourself. Now, there's a book called The 5 Love Languages. When I ask men what they think their wife's love language is, if they don't know what they are, I tell them what they are. But I always finish by saying, assume she's all 5. Now, the 5 love languages, and I'll try and rattle them off the top of my head if you're not familiar with them. They're acts of service, they're words of affirmation, they're gift giving, their physical touch, and their quality time. Okay, I remembered them. So my question to you would be, what quality time do you spend with your partner? Now, doing this, It's not quality time. Talking to your partner with one eye on the footy is not quality time. Quality time is phones off, laptops down, you and her on a walk. Off you go, spending quality time. Words of affirmation are, when you met her, what I say to people, there's one of my clients is a chef, and he tells me about his signature dish. And I say, tell me what it is. And he explains this dish, and it's phenomenal. I say, if one of those ingredients is missing, how will that dish turn out? Well, it'll be nothing like my signature dish. However, in the recipe of love and in our courting, we bought the flowers, we took them on the dates, we took them to the movie, we did our weekly pay on a handbag or diamond earrings or whatever they were. And then we got her. We put her over there and we let the gut come out and we started smoking or doing whatever we did, which wasn't what lured her in. So you caught her and then you changed the game. So my question or my suggestion to a lot of people is, how did the relationship begin? And it begins again tomorrow. And that's every moment that passes, another opportunity to turn it all around. Every sunrise is a brand new life. And so, but you got to have it as if it's 8, then 10's how it feels today. It's got to feel like that again tomorrow. And here's the thing about life. They say, Jim Rohn says, you will live a life of, there are 2 pains you can live life by, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Now, the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is successful people don't want to have to do the things they have to do to be successful either, but they just do them. The unsuccessful people don't do them. Nike spent over $300 million in 1985 on their Just Do It campaign. Now, whether some of you were alive or even aware of it back then, I'm sure you've heard of the slogan, just do it. Now, if you think something needs to be done, then just do it. And you would be surprised. Many men, when I'll say to them, okay, well, when was the last time you bought your wife some flowers? Well, I don't know, maybe a month. So listen, think about it. When did you go out on a date? Now, invariably, when the trouble happens, there's an African proverb that says, don't look where you fell, look where you slipped. So something happened before you fell. It's a series of moments. As much as I say, every moment adds up to a life, there's a moment by moment that little by little became a lot. And first of all, someone might go, oh, that was a nasty, nasty word. Then it's, oh, another nasty word. This is where we talk about boundaries. Now, you either set boundaries. Boundaries aren't barricades. Boundaries have to be healthy, where they're going to say, excuse me, please don't speak to me like that. Nelson Mandela said, don't raise the level of your voice, raise the level of your argument. So in conversation, the idea would be to say, okay, what is it that you're really saying? It's never the towel on the bed, as I say. So the towel on the bed is symbolic. They just keep blaming. I remember saying to a woman once, if that towel on the bed was a naked woman, you couldn't possibly, it wasn't her, of course, you couldn't possibly be as cranky as you are. You wouldn't be that cranky. So this has happened. It was symbolic, whatever else was going on. And that's where I asked the question, what's really the problem? And so when somebody's really, really cranky, you say, okay, fair enough. Sorry, that's non-confrontational body language. What's really going on here? And they'll tell you what's really going on. Now, the word resilience itself comes from the Latin word resiliere, which means to recoil and rebound. Now, fleas can jump 220 times their body height, which is the equivalent to leaping tall buildings in a single bound. It is equivalent to a human being jumping over the Eiffel Tower. Now, it's not that fleas have these very, very strong leg muscles. They have a little pad of protein that sits behind their leg. It's a pad of protein that is called resiliere, which is where the word resilience came from. Resilient, rather. It's pronounced resilient, like the word resilience, but it means to recoil and rebound. And if you think about resilience, resilience is your ability to recoil and rebound. Now, when I ask people, I mentioned the purpose idea. So your first part of your purpose is to do your plan, to give yourself your numbers out of that. Understand your roles and responsibilities. So here's the thing, we wear a lot of hats as men or as people. We wear a lot of hats. we're the father, we're the husband, we're the in-law, we're the boss, we're the employee. There are a lot of hats that we wear. If you find yourself wearing a hard hat in places that you shouldn't have to, as in you're just about to come home, then you ask yourself, okay, what's going on? Where did I slip rather than where do I fall? I'm wearing this as a prevention rather than I'm wearing it as a cure rather than a prevention. And that's where you've got to look at it. So the R, I look at purpose, as I say, the P is planning, the U is understanding, the R is review, renew, reset, reframe. So review where you did slip, whether it's mental, physical, spiritual, social, financial, family, business, or romance. Where did you let yourself go? When did you decide to start smoking? At this time of the year, you see a lot of ads for new year, new you. I say to people, no, new year, old you. We were all born perfect. There are no ugly babies. There are no fat babies. There are no, you look at Indigenous people around the world and you see Indigenous people performing at concerts. Now, the white man, for want of a better word, came in, introduced the genocide that almost happened to Aboriginals in Australia. They're almost wiped out by the diseases that white man brought to the country from the UK, from England, and wiped out tribes of people who caught these things like smallpox and they died. But we also introduced sugar and soft drinks and alcohol and all these things that changed their state of being. Now, these same things we've introduced into our own lives. And again, I was very, very lucky. I've got 10 brothers and sisters. I'm the middle child of a 10-kid family. And I would actually, as a result, we didn't have ice cream and soft drinks and all those things that were fattening foods. And we didn't have a car. So we kind of had to walk or run everywhere. We generally ran everywhere because we were running late for trains and buses and things like that, or school. And so I developed a good cardiovascular system, and we always developed good eating habits because where I lived, we had about 15 fruit trees in the backyard. So during summer, we sat around eating peaches and apples and apricots and things like that over the summer months. And we also had orange trees and lemon trees and mandarin trees that we ate through the winter months. But we moved a lot. We drank fresh water out of the hose, didn't drink soft drinks, didn't really meet alcohol until I was about 18. But I quit alcohol at the beginning of 2022 for the year as one of those renew things, and to prove to my clients that it could be done. So when you sit there and write out your plans, they're not set in stone. You write them out, but you have to review them every single day. Now, I'll show you something that I do with my own clients. Now, when I talk about the idea of your purpose, so there's the planning document, and it's called Find Your Phenomenal, and there's your purpose. So what I'm saying to you guys right now is, there's my plan. That's what I understand my plan to be, and all my roles and responsibilities, what's non-negotiable. That's how I review and renew. What didn't work for me, what's never worked for me. The P is the people. So who are the people on my team? There are people that are either on my side and people that aren't on my side. There are people in your life that should be supporting you who could be your worst enemy. One of my clients was telling me recently that he went on holidays with his family and his family. Now, by that, I mean, he went with his wife and his 2 kids, and he went with his mother and his father and his 3 brothers. And they went to Fiji. And lucky for him and myself, during the course of the middle of that holiday, we had a Zoom meet. It was one of his coaching sessions. I said, how's it going, mate? And he said, mate, really terribly. My wife's really unhappy with me. And I said, why? He said, well, she wants to go for a walk on the beach every night. And, I'm having dinner with my family every night. And I think that's really, really important. And I said, what do you mean your family? And he said, well, my mum and dad and my brothers. And I said, did your parents pay for the holiday? He said, no. And I said, how are they going? He goes, oh, my brothers pick on me a lot and all that sort of thing. And I said, right, I think right now there's a cry for help going on here. Your wife's pointing out that it's not really working for her. She didn't come to Fiji to go to dinner with your family. My mother's got a saying, the difference between outlaws and in-laws is that in-laws are wanted. She's funny, my mother. But the point of that is, here's this bloke doing right by his family and doing wrong by his family. My older brother said to me many, many years ago, you don't spend much time with the family. And I said, what are you talking about? I spend all my time with my family. He said, I'm in our family. And I said, well, hang on. There's my family and there's our family. And I spent 18 years of my life with our family. Now with my family, I'm building them to get them to where I want them to be. Now, the day that my daughters turned 18, it wasn't like I said tools down, but I had gotten them to a level of responsibility. When we have children, the children are dependent. Our job is to raise them to a level of independence, but through the course of those years, interdependence, where we all work as a family, where everyone has a responsibility. It's not up to mum to do this, that, and the other. It's not up to, dad to do this. You're teaching your children responsibility, and you're actually setting them up for the future. All those people who go, you see, my son won 6th place today. No, he didn't. He was the 5th of the losers. So it's all very well and good to kind of encourage your children, but you've got to let your children learn mistakes. As men, some of the struggles that men have of overcoming adversity and being resilient is that their parents kind of shielded them from the things that they should have learned and grown through as children. And we can have the same problem. I'm a big fan of cicadas. Where I grew up in the Blue Mountains of Sydney, and, cicadas were free. So they're a pretty good toy to have. They're a pet that didn't require any looking after because they sucked sap out of trees. And when I realized I could actually catch them a lot easier than shaking trees or climbing trees or sneaking up on them, and while they were making their loud noises, I found it was a lot easier to actually catch them as they came out of the ground in the shells. As the sun went down, I'd walk around and I'd get these cicadas out of the ground. I'd taken them into my bedroom and I'd put them on a towel in the cupboard, close the door, and the next morning I'd have all these soldiers lined up and I'd take them to school and I'd sell them. So that was a good way for me to make money, because we didn't get pocket money as kids either. But what I did, which taught me a really valuable lesson very early on in life as well, to fast track the process, greed, I guess, but it wasn't I was going to be able to sell these cicadas any faster than the next day anyway. But if anyone's ever seen how a cicada comes out of its shell, it gets out of the ground, it climbs up, it splits its back, and over the process of a good 1 to 4 hours, it comes out like the Hulk, very, very slowly, crawls out of this shell. These little shriveled wings come out, and then each pump of the blood makes its wings come out, and then they harden into what they call an exoskeleton, and it flies off into the yonder. I used a razor blade and cut the back of this shell and pulled a bunch of cicadas out. Now, the next morning I woke up and they're all there shriveled. The wings didn't develop. So not only did I lose a bit of money that day, I felt terrible because I'd actually ruined pretty much the lives of these cicadas. The reason I refer to cicadas a lot in my life as well is that they spend something like 99% of their lives mucking around underground on the roots, eating root sap. Then they come out and they live for 2 weeks as these beautiful creatures that make these sounds, and they live for 2 weeks. And a lot of us spend so much time mucking around in the mud and the roots and the sap, and then we waste, when we finally do wake up to ourselves and not worry what they say. The first mistake is caring what people think, and the second mistake is thinking that they care. When you get to the stage where the only person you worry about who you think about, when you worry about what you think about yourself, that's when you've actually cracked the code, because that's when you take personal responsibility and you live a responsible life rather than a reactive life. A reactive life is a life of blame. It's everybody else's fault. Road rage is the bloke in front of you's fault for you running late. Responsible people have the ability to respond, and they take preventative measures so that they're not mucking up or slipping up or falling down or having to face adversity that they created themselves. So back to the cicada story. What I learned was I stopped the metamorphosis process. So with our children as well, they've got to learn some of these lessons. Now, I'm not about saying, spoil the rod and spare the child. But a lot of men say to me, and a lot of parents say to me, I was watching television with my son and 2 men were kissing, or, this woke movement, the LGBTQI, ABC movement means that they're given all these, hey, here's the thing. Your sons and daughters will be who your sons and daughters will be. And role models are designed to be a model for the children, a role for the children to want to be. Whatever you want your sons to be that yourselves. So you can't complain about the fact your son didn't become the man you wanted him to be, or your daughter didn't become the woman you wanted her to be, if you don't show your daughter how a woman should be treated by how you treat her mother. If you don't show your son how to treat women by how you treat his mother. Parents who allow their sons to hit their sisters, they're allowing their son, there's a domestic violence out around that, of course, but they're allowing their son to do something. My father took, 6 boys. He took us all one day on a train trip down to Sydney, and then a bus ride out to Long Bay Jail. And we walked up, and there's this big jail. And he said, if you don't do this, that, and the other, you're going to end up in jail. And I remember at the time thinking, whoa, look at that view. This is a pretty good view out there. And he started telling us what would end us up in jail. And we kept walking and walking and walking. And then he goes to this cliff face, and he said, there is one thing I don't ever, ever, ever want to hear or see you boys do, and that is to ever hit a woman. It is the greatest crime, sin, mistake you will ever make. Don't worry about jail. It was just such a scary thing. And he made it such a, when I say scary thing, the word heroin to me was such a scary thing as a young kid, because people who took heroin died. That's all I knew happened. And my father, it was probably the most stern thing he ever said to us. And the way he treated my mother. My father was a very angry Irish man. He only passed away last year, June 2021. 85, lived a great life, died in his sleep, perfect way to go, as everyone says, meaning well. But he walked up to the doctor the day that he died. He got 120/80 blood pressure. Everything was tickety-boo, died in his sleep. But he might have been a very angry man. He never said a terse word to my mother. He walked in every day and he showed us how much he loved our mother, and he treated us so well. My mother's still alive, outlived Dad, which we're all shocked by. So the reckoning behind that is there's a big responsibility we have as fathers in the steps that we take to prevent things happening for our children, but also they need to learn the lessons. Bruce Lee, another saying that he said was, don't buy your children the things you didn't have, teach them the things you didn't know. Material wears out, knowledge never does. I said to a young boy one day, what's one thing you can give that you will never lose? And he said, love. I said, no, believe me, you can give love and you can lose love. He said, what then? I said, knowledge. And to teach is to learn twice. And I think it's everyone's responsibility to make the next generation better than the generation we were. There's no point repeating the sins of the father of what your father did, you didn't want to represent. But it's surprising how many men become just like the fathers they didn't want to be like, because it's the role models that they had. Break the mold, stop the behavior that you don't want to emulate. And you might even see it, and there is scientific proof that it's in our DNA. But there's a book called Dirty Genes, which means we can wash our genome and change things. My father did have a terrible temper, and my younger brother said to me one day, my dad said to me that you have the worst temper of anyone he's ever met in his life, and it's going to be your downfall. And what my father thought of me meant so much to me. And because my dad's Irish and taught us how to box, and as 6 boys, we were always picked on and we always had fights, I thought my father was proud of the fact that I could look after myself. When I actually asked my father, did he say this to my brother? He said, yeah, I did. And I said, well, I never hit anyone first in my life, Dad. He said, yeah, but here's the thing. If someone is starting a fight with you that you really wonder why they are, they've probably got a gun or a knife, and there's probably something else going on. So the world has changed. It's no longer the Marquess of Queensbury sort of thing. So just stop the fighting. And I had to really, really work on my temper. Now, there's an expression that says true weakness in a man is recognizing he has a weakness and not correcting it. Stephen Covey said that, and he's the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So if you recognize you have a weakness and you don't do anything about it, that's true weakness. Now, one of the things that I had in my review thing at the very top was I've always hired people to do technical things for me, and I've always thought of myself as a bit of a technophobe, and I haven't been able to do things like Excel. Now, what that has ended up in happening is that if somebody was sick or COVID or whatever, my business and the way that I needed to do things was stalled. So one of my big goals this year is to learn technical things. And it's going quite well so far, but it's just an example of how you've got to overcome that. So now I've talked about your planning, your understanding, your reviewing, your renewing, your setting, the people on your team. Now the O in My Purpose Mnemonic is optimism. Now, of all I think there's a book by a man called, he was an Austrian psychiatrist. His name's Viktor Frankl. And he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. It should be mandatory reading in high schools. it chronicles his journey through Nazi Germany and through the concentration camps. I think he was in 4 of them. And as a psychiatrist, he witnessed what the men did. And between Christmas and New Year's, somewhere between 70 and 75% of the prisoners would die in the camp, and they would succumb to illnesses and things that don't even exist anymore, of course. But he recognized that the 3 traits that survivors had in common were rich inner, an inner sense of self. They really believed in who they were. They had goals for the future, so plans for what they were going to do when they got out, and optimism. They had undying optimism. They just believed that things were going to get better. And you have to. Now, people talk about toxic optimism. If you hear somebody talk about toxic optimism, there's somebody who's a pessimist. Now, pessimists will call themselves realists. That way they don't have to accept that they're a pessimist. Or they'll call an optimist Pollyanna. Now, I was a very pessimistic young man up until the age of 10. Everything, I was a middle child. I was either too young to do anything with the big kids. I was too old to do anything with the little kids. And I always felt I missed out. And I remember being, I don't know where we were. We went on a train somewhere and it was to a fun fair or whatever. And I sat back and I watched as this brother got to go on that ride and this brother got to do that whack-a-mole and this sister got that show bag or whatever. And I got nothing. And at the very end of the day, I said to my mother, oh, I didn't get to go on anything, like the whinger that I was. And my mother's answer was, she gave me a 2-cent coin, so I'm aging myself here. But she said to me, here you go, sad sap. Throw that in the wishing well and wish that you're in a better family. And my first thought was, I wonder if I can put this in my right hand and stick it in my pocket because there's 2 cents. And then my second thought was, I don't know what family I might get into. And then as I threw the coin in the wishing well, I just wished that I wasn't sad all the time. So I'd actually put it out there that I didn't want to be sad all the time. Now, as I turned around and I walked off, a woman smiled at me. I thought, wow, and it's working. And all the way to the train station, people were smiling at me. And I sat on the train and these 2 big men sat there across from me. And my mother came around and we would sit wherever we could sit on the train. My mother came around and she handed me these sandwiches. Now, where I grew up, my mother would make, buy bread in bulk and she'd make sandwiches and she'd freeze these sandwiches. And so generally, when you got your lunch, you were crunching through, ox tongue sandwiches with beetroot, which was terrible, but ox tongue was cheap. And this day, my sandwich actually had thawed. And I was like, oh, happy days. And then these 2 big, scary men, when I looked up, one of them said, you hungry, big fella? And they laughed and I laughed. And I just thought, wow, everything's going so well. The wish had come true. Now, my 10-year-old mind believed that my wish had come true. I believed I was no longer going to be sad. I never was again. Adversities faced me along the way, and anyone who thinks they're going to get out of this life alive is kidding themselves. I had a 19-year-old, well, it was my daughter, who said to me one day, Dad, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life. I said, well, isn't that interesting? At 19 years of age, this is the first time you've ever had to face adversity. What a charmed and gifted life you've had. Excuse me. So be optimistic. It's easier said than done, but there's something that I do, and I have a lot of, when I say mnemonics are designed to help me remember things, but there are little things that I do that are preventative rather than curative. I go to the doctors 4 times a year. There is probably 1 million people walking around out there with cancer right now that they don't even know about because they don't get blood tests and they don't get things done. I said to somebody this morning, you put sunscreen on before you go out on a hot day? Yes. What happens if you don't? I get burnt. Okay. So preventative measures stop you from getting burnt. So for me, every morning I walk in, and I learned this years ago, and I smile at myself in the mirror for 1 minute. Now, as it happens these days, I'm laughing as I walk in because I think this is a silly thing to be doing, but it hasn't failed me yet. But on the days that I think, wow, the day's not going my way, what's happened? It'll be, oh, I didn't need to go to the bathroom. I've got up straight away and I've gone for a walk. I haven't actually looked at myself in the mirror. I haven't primed myself. There's a thing called mirror neurons. And you might notice that the body language you exhibit in a good friend, you might be sitting there at the bar or wherever you are, and you notice he's after the same as you. That's a good friendship, mirror neurons. But you can mirror your own neurons by priming yourself, by smiling at yourself. Another thing you can do is journal. I'm sure that's big. When I said earlier on about a problem shared is a problem halved, Sometimes a problem shared is a problem squared, depending on who you tell. Plato said, thinking is the soul talking with itself. There is no better way to talk with yourself than through journaling. Journaling frees your mind of whatever is on your mind. We learn to think on paper. I was telling a group that one day, and one of the blokes goes, yeah, okay, Boomer. We learned to write on iPads. I'm an iPad generation. I said, hang on. My nephew, Felix, is 5 years of age. And my sister sent us a photo the other day. And at the top, there's Felix with his HP pencil. And it says Felix at the top of the page. And he wrote his name down. Doing the HSC or anything like that, do your exams in pencil. This is the thing. We learn to think on paper. So when you write, all those people, I tried journaling, you don't have to write, dear diary, today I'm feeling glum or whatever. You write whatever comes into your head. My journaling practice is, I write the date in the top right-hand corner. I write what the time is, and off I go. My desk is off to the left, and I just blah, 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 blah. And I write, and I write, and I write. It's all jibber jabber. I never actually have to look at it again. When I say jibber jabber, I then have palm cards off to the right of that, where I will go, right, that's what I'm going to do today. That's what I'm going to do today. And then I carry them around in my pocket. And this to-do list then becomes my to-do list. I tick them off. Every time I tick something off, I get an endorphin rush, feel better about myself. Now, you guys would probably call them MITs, your most important things. Warren Buffett writes out his priorities every day. Prior to the 1500s, prior to the age of industrialization, the word priorities was priority. It was only pluralized when we got a lot more things we had to do. So write out your to-do list and then write out your priorities. Now, one of my things that I have in my morning routine, anybody who wants to develop a morning routine, I've got a template which I send out. Just email me, david@leeway.com.au, and I'll send you the template just to give you an idea of how to start your morning routines. But that is what leads me into the S in purpose is your steps and your solutions. What steps are you taking to solve the problems? The idea that, you look where you slipped rather than where you fell. It's like the story of the couple that are picnicking and they hear some child screaming in the lake. She's coming down the river. The man jumps in and fishes the kid out of the river. You okay? And then there's another kid screaming in the river. He keeps running in and fishing the children out of the river. Another man comes along and he sees what's happening. He runs upstream and catches this bloke who's throwing kids in the river. So rather than sit there and keep dealing, insanity's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, Albert Einstein said. Albert Einstein also said, you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that got you into that problem. So when I say to people, things aren't completely not going your way. What is it that you can start doing that you're not doing that is not serving you? What can you stop doing that you are doing that is not serving you? What can you continue doing? Because some of the things you're doing are working well. So keep doing them. But the easiest way to start your day is with a morning routine. I have a morning routine so that my days aren't routine. My routine is so habitual, and so I don't even have to think about it. But at one stage, I had to go, okay, get up this time, make my bed, have a lemon juice and salt water, have an espresso, journal, read something smart, meditate, exercise. And this is what I would have to do. Now, it is so systematic, that happens. Now, I've done all that before I face the world and speak to anybody. So that's the steps and solutions that I put in place. And that's what the S in your purpose mnemonic is. Now, E is effectiveness. What is the most effective way to go about it? And then just do it. Just do it. So the idea of that is if you're not happy with where you are in life, when I say new year, old you, there was a time in your life where what you were doing was working well. What happened? Now, I say there was a time in people's lives where we're all born as human beings, we're born with two fears, only two fears, the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. When my first child was born, the doctor came in and he held her by her hands and he dropped her. And he didn't drop her, he dropped her back on her. He had his hand behind her head. He held her hands and she went like that. And then he listened to her hearing, checked her eyes, and he said, she's perfect. Now, I said, what are you doing? He said, we're born with two fears, the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. I'm checking to see your child can hear. I'm checking to see that she's got the catch reflex. So it still happens to us sometimes as we're falling asleep. Now, he also gave me a piece of advice at the time, which has served me phenomenally well. And I give it to every father I ever meet. And he said to me, because at the time he said, she's perfect. He said, this is the 35,000th child that I've actually checked on in my illustrious career. And everyone I meet who's an expert, I met a lot of experts and celebrities and things in my life, and I always ask them the same question. What advice would you give to a novice in relation to your expertise? What would you tell me? And I said, as the father of the first child I've ever had, what advice would you give to a father? And he said, reward what you ignore and ignore what you reward. And off he walked. And I thought to myself, okay, that's great. Didn't mean much to me. When that same beautiful little girl was about 4 years old, we're in the lolly aisle at Coles, and she's chucked her first and last tantrum. And she's stomping and stomping and stomping because she wanted these caramel whatevers they were. And I said no. And I was just about to give it to her, and I thought, and all I heard was, ignore what you reward and reward what you ignore. And I didn't give them to her, and I walked off. I ignored the behavior. She ran after me and said, pick me up, Daddy, pick me up, pick me up. And I picked her up. Now, when that same girl was about 7, I'd sent her to her room for timeout. Now, timeout for mine at the time, if they'd done something wrong, I sent them to their bedroom for as many minutes as they were old. I saw that on Super Nanny. And she was 7 years old at the time. And so I sent her in there for 7 minutes. And I was standing outside her door holding onto the handle so she wouldn't come out. And she wrote a note. I've still got this note. And she slipped it under the door. And she wrote whatever she'd written and said, please respond. And I wrote something along the lines of, when you pout and when you shout, you have to spend time in time out. And then she wrote back another poem. So we've got this dialogue that goes back. I told everybody who was anybody about this poem, and I said it in front of her. I really, really rewarded what ordinarily I might have ignored. And anytime my children did something fabulous that I really wanted to encourage, I praised them to the hilltops. That eldest daughter that I walked with today, and I was talking to her about the 5 love languages, and I said, what would yours be? Do you know? And she said, words of affirmation. And I thought, isn't that interesting? That all those things. My eldest sister said to me one day, do you think you might be giving your children a big head by telling them how fantastic they are all the time? And I said, it'll be easier for me to tell those little girls when they're older to pull their head in if they get too big a head than it will by keeping them down and telling them to go and grab the world by its borders when I've kept them down all the time because she was raising her children the way we were raised, which was children should be seen and not heard. You're not important. Now, curiously, my youngest daughter, who I walked with a couple of days ago, I had to say to her, I reminded her of that story. And I said, you know what? When your Auntie Patricia said that to me, today's the day I'm going to tell you to pull your head in, because it's however many days into the year. And if I hadn't called you, I wouldn't have heard from you. And I'm going to keep calling you, but it'd be nice to get a phone call back. It'd be nice for you to say, hey, Dad, do you want to go out for dinner? Or do you want to go out for a walk? And that's our job as parents, because, even at that age, I didn't give a jigger. Mark Twain said, I left home at the age of 14 because my dad was such an idiot. When I returned home at 21, I was amazed at how much the old man had learned. Now, commensuratively, I left home at 18. And when I returned home, as in did my worldly travels, at the age of 23, I got on famously with my father, and we connected through letter writing. I went to Ireland, spent a few months there, wrote letters to my father, and we connected on a really good level. We're best friends ever. And even on his 85th birthday, I had written a card to him saying, to the scariest man of my youth and the fondest man of my adulthood, happy birthday to you. So I'm hoping that was I have to put a timer on or else I would ramble all night long, as you can probably guess. But I'm hoping some of the things that I've spoken to you tonight have helped you just put a viewpoint on adversity. This too shall pass. Winston Churchill said, when you're going through hell, keep going. I look at the things that have shaped me in my life, and I'm actually really, really happy that they have happened. One of my sisters actually said to me one day, a younger sister said, how can you drink with this man? I was sitting with my father. How can you drink with this man after the way that he raised us? And I actually said, well, I'm pretty happy with who I am. So if I hadn't been raised the way that I was raised, I don't know how I would have turned out. So cheers, Dad. And that was that. And the reality of it is everything that's look at things that have happened to you as things that have happened for you. What lessons did you learn? Even when my kids were little, I used to say to them, you never make a mistake. The first time you do something wrong, it's a lesson. The second time, it's a mistake. The third time, if you do the same thing again, knowing that you'll hurt yourself or somebody else, then it's either a crime or a sin. So wake up to yourself. With that, as I say, I'm happy to anybody, if anybody would like to, any information on my purpose, mnemonic, send me an email. If you're interested in any of the programs that I offer, I do a 12-week program. One of them is called 91 Days of Mondays. It's pretty much where you treat every day as a Monday. 91 days is 13 weeks. Some people think that the number 13 is unlucky. It takes 12 weeks to break and set habits, but by the 13th week, you pretty much are pretty certain of who you are as a man and what you want from life because you've put it down. There's different mnemonics I use. There's a dream mnemonic. We look at your destiny. We look at your legacy. Now, when I say we, it's me. If you want information on courses, write an email to hello@leeway.com.au. Someone will get that information to me. But anyone wants a 15-minute discovery session with me, I'll do them for free, where you might say, okay, just want you to follow up on what you said the other night. No obligation, as I say. I love helping anybody that I can. To me, it's why I do what I do. They say if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. It's 9:30 now. I'll be up at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'll get a nap in at some stage. I just finished writing a book, which took me 6 months to write. It'll be out in April. It's called The 8 E's of Equilibrium, and each of those E's are things that you do over the 8 hours of your leisure time, which gives you longevity, allows you to live your legacy rather than leave it. I could talk about it for hours, as I say, but anybody who's interested in that, just drop me an email, david@leeway.com.au, and I'll give you what those 8 E's are. And again, I'm happy to have a chat with anybody for 15 minutes that'll get you over a hump. I spoke with a fellow today. He had a couple of things that were just, and I asked him a bunch of questions. By the end of those 15 minutes, he was free. When I say free, he knew what he needed to do. We all know what we should do. I had somebody say to me recently, I did this, and I said, okay, first thing that pops into my head is that maybe, did you think about doing this? He goes, I did. And I said, why didn't you? He said, well, I thought about that, but then I thought this. And I thought, when you thought about that, that was your mind telling you what to do. When you thought about that, that was your mini mind, your limiting beliefs telling you what to do. So when I mentioned earlier on that we're born with 2 fears, the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises, every other fear that we got from there on in, we inherited or they were given to us. So any limiting belief you have, someone gave it to you, someone told you you weren't good enough, someone bullied you, someone picked on you, and your 7-year-old mind stalled. And you're probably still talking to yourself with that mind that a 7-year-old child created. So think with your adult mind now, however old you are, knowing what I now know about a person, place, situation, or thing. Would I do it again? How do I get out? And if it's how do I get out, how fast, and what steps do I take? So with that, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Any questions? I'm happy to stay around for another 5 to 10 minutes if you've got any. Otherwise, david@leeway.com.au. Otherwise, look me up on my website, leeway.com.au or mindandbodymastery.com.au. Very happy to give you more information about how I might be able to help you there. Otherwise, good luck, unless there's questions.
Gentlemen, you got any questions here for David?
I got one, Dave.
Yes, mate. How you doing? Did you get over COVID?
Yep, I'm over COVID now. Yeah, good. Yeah, just got one broken rib now. That's the next obstacle.
Very good. Be careful with the broken ribs because it can develop into pneumonia because you can't cough properly. Go to a physio and they'll actually work that phlegm out of your system if it stays in there.
Okay, yeah, it's doing good so far. Yeah, I think I've got a hold on it. But I've been thinking about this question for a month or so since I saw you last time.
Yeah.
You did actually answer. I didn't think you would, but it was what the doctor told you. It was ignore what you reward what you ignore.
Yeah.
And I still don't get it after you gave me this example just tonight.
Okay, so it's like anything. If you've got a garden, you pull out the weeds. You don't water the weeds. and you fertilize and you water the fruit and vegetables that you do want to grow. And so they say encouragement is verbal sunshine for the soul. If your children are doing things that you want them to do, like you might say to your son, can you take the rubbish out? Yeah, righto. If he does, say, mate, really proud of you. You've really stepped up. You've helped your mother out. You're making life easier. You're the man. You're going to be the man, bro. That's brilliant. If he starts going, blah, 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 don't argue with children. You don't negotiate with terrorists. You know what I mean? Children are like terrorists. They are the best negotiators you've ever seen in your life. I'm not doing that to you, do this. So you give in. It's like, no negotiation. I need you to do this for me. But if he keeps doing that, then ignore it. All right, you go to your room. I don't want to see it. Now, there's a saying by a 16th century Jesuit philosopher, Balthazar Gracian, and he says, know how to play the card of contempt, which is pretty much ignoring people. He says, for oblivion, which is the furthermost regions of space, oblivion is the entombment of the unworthy in the dust of their own nothingness. Now, it's pretty harsh, and they were pretty harsh back in those days. But when you send somebody to child out, or you go, no, television's off, and you walk away, no one likes to, even as kids, I am deaf. Oh, who said that? Must have been the wind. It did your head in. No one liked that. So when you ignore what you reward, I'm meaning don't reward things that you don't want to encourage in somebody, even if it's your partner. If she's shouting at you and I want you to calm down a little bit. And when you're ready to have a good conversation, we tell the children to use the indoor voice. Can you use your indoor voice? Well, please show me the level of respect that I'm showing you. If it's in the workplace, you say, excuse me, whoa, let's have a chat at lunchtime, but don't speak to me like that again. You keep your calm and you're setting a boundary, but you're not rewarding that. So ignore the behaviors you don't want to have in your children, but reward the ones you do. Because when my daughter said that her love language was words of affirmation, they're the affirmations that I kept giving her of well done, well done, well done, and I didn't ever, your children will often hear you saying bad things. Oh, this is the black sheep of the family, but they'll never say, here's my son, he's a legend. You do that. And this is my son, Billy. He's really good. And you tell what you want. Billy's a real doer. He's going to be a leader of the future. He can focus. He helps his mother around the house. Billy's going, wow, it's great. Dad loves me. Everyone wants their dad to love them. Every child wants their parents to love them. You look at kids of heroin addicted parents. They would rather stay there clinging to the heroin addicted parent than be put in a foster home, even though they don't know what's there. It's the fear of the unknown. But be the role model. Be the good dad. Don't be the heroin addicted dad. Don't be the kid, And so does that make a bit more sense?
Yeah, a lot more. Yeah. No, thanks. Yep.
And as I say, my thing is, if you want to send me an email, I'll respond. I set time aside. I'm such a freak on times, like I've got a clock here. There's a clock there. Time's my greatest commodity. But I set time aside where, as I say to my clients, if you see red in the text message box, there's that. Now, I haven't read that yet. It says delivered. So I'm going to get back to her in the next 20 minutes. So if she sees red, then she knows that I've actually I've got time to respond. I don't read my text messages until I can get back to that person in the next 20 minutes. Sometimes I'm going, bro, can I call you back in 10 minutes? Can I call you back at 4 o'clock this afternoon? And I put it in my calendar. So if you send me an email, of course I'm going to respond. And I wouldn't offer that unless I meant that. And to me, that's keeping promises to myself and to you guys. And the wrong promise I should have had was I wasn't going to have tacos before tonight, just in case they repeated on me. And I did. So excuse me for any of the belching along the way tonight.
No, you hit him well.
What's your name again?
Ross.
Oh, good on you, Ross. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thanks for tonight, Dave. Thank you very much.
All right, Ross, champion. Thanks for stepping up.
Dave, thank you so much, mate, for your knowledge and your insight, fellas. I did put into the chat David's email there. If not, feel free to reach out to us inside of your dream teams and we'll provide that to you. But men, thank you for taking part in tonight's session and looking forward to the rest of the week and beyond. Dave, you're a legend, mate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great night and look forward to meeting you somewhere along the way.
Champion.
Thanks, Dave. That was good. Cheers, mate.
Very well. Thanks, gents. All the best.